Exposure to nature is, I think, the best kind of exposure that can be given to a child. And it's been proved that a person attuned to nature is usually a happier human being rather than somebody who has been exposed to only the urban scenario, the urban ambience. And today, unfortunately, everybody, younger generation and particularly school children, keep on watching television, which has a number of effects. One is, of course, that they are to that extent have little connectivity with their parents, and the experience of the parents is less bonding. There is more exposure to extraneous things, including various aspects like violence and sex and whatever else. And they grow prematurely and they grow into rather an artificial kind of it has to have long term studies to find out okay, what are the long term effects of all this, but I don't think they are very conducive. Now, as far as I was concerned, I was brought up in an atmosphere where wildlife was next door. But I must warn you, at that time, shikar was very much a part of the social milieu. समझो कि it was a very accepted norm, and I don't defend that. कि shikar was a good thing. There were a number of things which affected that kind of a thing, or were the outcome of it. One was that the families who were owning areas or in charge of areas, the princes, the British, they had a stake in protecting those animals. And to protect those animals, they had to protect the forest and the habitat. So, for totally and wholly selfish reasons, they protected an ecosystem. There was more wildlife in those princely states, as I was telling Mr. Dava, that where the prince was interested in shikar than those he was not, because then he protected it for again selfish reasons. And the same thing was British. There was much more preservation in those districts governed by the British, where the people were the collectors were more interested. Incidentally, the first Inspector General of Forest of India, Indian, M.D. Chaturvedi, who was the first Indian after independence, 48. He said something very interesting, which you will not agree with, but had a interesting facet to it. He said no DFO should be permitted to become a conservator unless he had shot a tiger. No, because then he would be interested in the thing and not just in trees. Um, you see, and then there are, I'm not, and I know I'll be accused, okay, you are taking this side, I'm not. My book there are photographs of slaughter and of huge number of trophies. But can you tell me, again, it was finished by the thing, you have a lot of propaganda. But that is not the correct factor um, of, of the decline of wildlife. In three neighboring districts of Madhya Pradesh, હવે છ થઈ ગયા છે એ ત્રણમાંથી, પણ when I was there were three neighboring districts of Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh. They were one state when I was forest secretary. In 35 years, three families in three those districts shot, they and some of their guests, in 35 years, shot 3,500 tigers. And yet, at the end of that 3,500 tigers, there were more tigers then Then 20 years later, when after official shikar had been stopped in 1916, and there were still more tigers, then after 3,500 had been shot, then after now, and after Project Tiger. Please tell me why. Because the whole thing was protected. કોઈની મગદૂર હતી અને વાઇલ્ડ લાઇફ એક્ટ નહોતો ત્યારે. But nobody was allowed to shoot. Nobody. It was totally selfish. It was totally totalitarian. Dadagiri, exactly. But there it was. So it had its own advantages and disadvantages, be as it may. No, the thing was that one graduated from it. And it's very interesting psychology, and I'm again not defending it. The act of shooting or killing was the act of possession. I love you and I shall shoot you because you will only be mine. This was for trophies, not for meat. Again, it sounds ridiculous, but that was what it was. And you put it up on the wall so that you remember it all your life. I'm not defending it again and again, I say that. There it was. So there were two kinds of shikaris in those days. Those who were gunners, who liked the rifle, like he was mentioning, and who regarded the animal as a target. And they were the other kind who used the gun to do this ultimate act of selfishness, which was possessing an animal by shooting it, by killing it. So there it was. It's psychological to that extent. પણ એ બધું હતું, and now I'm so glad it's over. Do you realize that when my first tenure as Director of Wildlife, more than 85% of our national parks and sanctuaries at that time, more than 85%, were the hunting reserves of the British and of the princes. બધું તૈયાર હતું. It just required continuation of the project, but we didn't allow that. There was a period of democracy in which it was allowed to go waste. And the rebuilding started after it was rather late. The amount of animals and wildlife and forests destroyed between 1950 or 49, 50 समझो, to 60 was the worst period. 60 પછી હતું નહીં, એટલે it was very little destroyed by that time. And by 70 then, the awareness came in, leadership came in, and therefore there was a change. ને જે બચ્યું છે અહીંયા, whatever has been saved by what happened between 1972 or 1971 to 1980-85, 10-15 years now. I think you have a more important role to play now than before. Because you see, Pella, when the leadership was interested in nature conservation, you played a supportive role because and you provided the kind of inputs, the stimulus to that extent, and also expertise, which complemented and supplemented the government effort. At times when, as I was telling Navalbhai, there was BNHS, and at that time we had some very good people: Salim Ali, Zafar Fateh Ali, Humayun Abdul Ali, J.C. Daniel, and there were others who were there. Ram Whitaker was also there. So these people provided expertise, inputs, and they told you of. I remember Salim Ali came in walking into my office and saying, "What are you doing about this? What are you doing about that?" So they would say, they were our conscious keepers in government. But they were not dependent on government. They were doing their own thing. However, what has happened is that the number of NGOs have mushroomed, and why not? Rightly so. and they are doing a complementary kind of a work. I'm slightly elaborating since you asked a rather an important question. They uh, have got the resources which at that time were not available to the NGOs. There is much more funding, and there is also collaboration with government projects. In the early stages, whatever projects were there, whether it was the Bharatpur project, were funded by abroad, and there were very few. Now, indigenous funding is available, and very good that it should happen. That there are very large number of NGOs working in the field, and number of them are working. The major ones too are working with the government, and they get governmental support and they get governmental funding too. So what has happened is they become an instrument of the government. They become an agency of the government, and therefore they cannot speak out or take a stand against government. That is why an independent organization such as yours can not only be the conscious keeper, but they can politely but firmly tell the government where they are wrong. But more importantly, you are able to teach and disseminate knowledge. It is even much more important now when the powers that be, when the government itself is not only not interested in nature conservation, but unfortunately, and I say so with some kind of anguish, is finding ways whereby the existing infrastructure, legislation, bureaucracy is used to facilitate so-called development. I was very impressed. I was very impressed. I think okay, I'll talk to. You should get. Have you received some awards? You must have received. An organization can't run on only volunteer. At least the expenses have to be paid for. And अब तो ठीक से बहुत सारी बात है कि you doing it from your private this and that. Don't make money out of it. Don't do anything, but it has to be self-supportive. पर ये बात अपनी साची. Don't take money from the government. The only thing I can say is God bless you and keep it up, because you need more people like you. And even when you may not be an active volunteer and have your domestic or your family obligations, you raise families, you have to work for your and your family for their upkeep and livelihood. So carry the message to the next community, to the next generation, and you will always be an environmentalist, and you will always be a patriot. Take pride in it. એમાં કઈ શરમની વાત નથી. You are not anti-national. You are a nationalist. I believe in that, and I think that is important. आजकल conservation may not be important, but nationalism is very important. तो कोई મને કહે કે our conservation is anti-national? In a situation such as when the government is not taking leadership, the leadership should fall on somebody to save your national natural heritage, which is equally important as your cultural heritage, your religious heritage. And your protected areas are equally important as your temples. Temples of God, and I'm not talking about only temples, mosques, churches, everything.